Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Lieutenant Commander Gangler, the Navy Reserve Medicine IRT Medical Program Manager. We are going to give you a brief on how to host a planning meeting and get you set up for a successful planning season. Okay, briefly, just to give you an overview, we're going to be talking about planning meeting preparation and what you need to know beforehand, tips for conducting a planning meeting, do's and don'ts, and TCON Etiquette, which is really important because a lot of your meetings will be done via TCON throughout the year. And then we're going to go over Zoom meetings because this has become kind of the new norm for a lot of our meetings, and so we're going to give you some tips there as well. Next slide. Okay, first we're going to talk about planning meeting preparation. First and foremost, you need to identify your objectives, whether it's the IPM, the MPM, the FPM. You really need to know as a lead planner what it is that you're going to be discussing, what level in the planning you should have completed before your meeting is over, and have everything kind of prepped for your specific meeting, whether it's IPM, MPM, like I said, FPM. You really want to know exactly what your objective is for that meeting and what milestones you should be hitting. Second, make sure you develop an agenda. Having an agenda is very important to make sure that you stay on track, to make sure that your meeting attendees are engaged, and to make sure that you are completing the steps that you need to bring you to the next level of your planning in the amount of time that you're given. The next would be to prepare relevant data and presentation materials in the Huddle workspace. We're going to further go over Huddle, and we're definitely going to go over in the workspace where you'll find all the tools and templates that you need to set you up for success. The medical planners have really done a great job of giving you all the templates that you need to prepare all of your data and all your presentation materials. You should be able to substitute your exercise, your specific IRT exercise information into those templates, and it should help flow really well for your meeting. Next is authoring the letter of instruction for the planning meeting. Now your LOIs should be done at least a month prior to your next meeting. And when you're at the MPM, for example, you'll be developing your LOI for your FPM before you leave. So the goal would be to develop your LOI for your next planning meeting at the current planning meeting that you're at. And your service component program managers need to see and approve those LOIs prior to you sending them out to your respective planners and your meeting attendees. So we need to make sure that we have that in no later than a month so we have enough time for funding, planning, travel, and getting orders approved. Next, sharing all your meeting materials with the meeting attendees prior to the meeting. This is really important, specifically your agenda. Your agenda should have everything that's going to be hit on in the meeting, but not full details of everything you're going to discuss. That's the point of the planning meeting. But you do want to have enough materials there so your members know exactly what's expected of them. If I'm the logistics planner for the exercise, I need to know exactly what's going to be expected of me during that meeting logistics-wise before I show up. And the Huddle workspace is where you'll be sharing all of your workspace materials for that planning meeting. It's very, very important that all of your members have access to that prior to, and that your workspace is set up for success. So when day one of your planning meeting, you roll in and you're good to go. Next slide. Okay, tips for conducting a planning meeting. I mentioned this in the last slide briefly, but establish a meeting purpose. So establish your objective. If your purpose of your IPM is to get to know your community partners right away, establish your site surveys so you know exactly where you're going to conduct your meeting your IRT exercise. You want to establish the purpose of the meeting with all of your attendees so everyone knows what they're there for, the mission that needs to be done that day, and what needs to be in place for you to continue on in your planning process. Include all necessary attendees. This sometimes can be challenging for a lead planner because you've not yet met everyone or you don't know who's been assigned to what role yet. So it's very important that you get with all of your different service contacts and make sure that they invite all the people that are necessary to attend these meetings. Third, don't just wing it. Please show up with an agenda, please show up with a plan, please show up with notes. Just winging it could cause for a lot of discussions to go down rabbit holes. It can cause us to get off track, and it can cause us to kind of steer away from our timeline. So please have an agenda in place and please a lot in that agenda for time for those discussions to happen so we don't derail our timeline too much. We don't want to have the entire planning conference go down in one day and then all of a sudden the next day, we're done 2 hours in because we crammed everything into day one. Please allow time for everyone to kind of get the work done constructively. Location is important now more than ever, as we know with COVID-19 and the changes that are happening. We need to make sure that location is key. So do we have a conference room that has enough place to socially distance from each other? Do we have a location that is close to the hotel? Is the location convenient for the community partner if they're coming? Is the location a good, a constructive work area? Do we have the proper setups for us to use, presentations, which you will definitely need, and IT support. So make sure that you do really see how far the location is from the airport. There's things that you need to consider when setting up locations of planning events. Definitely break the ice, number 5. You don't want this to take up too much time of your first day, but you do want enough time to kind of go around the room, have everyone introduce themselves, maybe have everyone say something interesting about themselves, what the IRT program has meant to them in the past or what they're excited to learn about the IRT program, something to break the ice without steering too far off the agenda. So you should allot for some time in your agenda to break the ice at the beginning. And then keeping the momentum. So like I said earlier, it's great the open discussions that the IRT planning meetings create, and there's great ideas that come up, and there's great communication that goes on in conversation, but we want to make sure that we keep it going, that we stay on track. So we can always table items. As a lead planner, you should be able to say, okay, this is great, let's leave this to the section that we're going to talk about later, or we have time scheduled for this, we're going to talk about this tomorrow. Just make sure that you're kind of steering the meeting and taking charge, letting people give their input, but also taking charge so you can stay on track with your agenda. And then be open-minded. So you want to absolutely get all the opinions from the people in your room at your planning meeting, and you want to create an open forum for conversation, but also, like I said, make sure you're staying on track with your plan. And then always review next steps and action points. So this will be for whatever meeting you conduct, whether it be an IPM, an MPM, an FPM, or if you're doing it via Zoom, or if you're having a TCON, always end your call with what's next in your planning process, who needs to provide that information, and then when the timeline is to get that back to you as the lead planner. Next slide. Okay, TCON etiquette. I think we've all probably been on TCONs at least sometime in the last year where you're hearing everyone's background noise when they're not speaking. So it's really important to really worry about, not worry, but it's important to be, to have etiquette during these TCON meetings. So for first, frequency and timing of calls. Frequency, meaning let's not schedule this every single week in the first month of planning the IRT, but maybe towards the end when we're getting close to the FPM, in between the FPM and final execution, you might be having those weekly TCONs, and that is appropriate. So really be considerate of everyone's time and make sure that you're filling calls with necessary information. If you're not, maybe you can have them a little less frequently. And then timing of calls, make sure that you are taking into account that there's people from all over the country that are going to be calling in. So make sure that when you get a general consensus of what time works for everyone, take into account that people have family lives and full-time jobs, and so maybe 8 p.m. on the East Coast might be too late for your East Coast people, but maybe 5 p.m. on the West Coast is too early for your West Coast people. So try to get creative with that and then adjust accordingly if need be. Always post the agenda in Huddle prior to the meeting. That goes for all meetings, but specifically for TCON meetings, because you will not have something up on the screen for everyone to look at while you're having your meeting. The moderator of the call, whoever that may be, should call in 5 minutes prior to the call, so this way everyone has a chance to get online and make sure that you're not cutting into that effective planning time. On that point as well, it is also important to make sure that all your members have that information so they know what number to call, what code to dial in, and if there's any issues with that, you can kind of troubleshoot prior to the meeting beginning. Roll call is very important. We've seen this work in many ways very successfully, and we've seen it work in ways that cause a little bit of chaos. So it's important that when you are coming on the call, you have someone designated to take roll call. That meaning you have your list of normal attendees, and you will call their name out and then ask if they're on the line. In addition, at the end of that, you can say, is there anyone else on the line that I have not called? That works a lot more efficiently than just saying who's on the line and then letting everyone just kind of talk over each other. It creates more time, it creates a little bit of background noise, and it's more efficient and starts your call off a little bit more organized if you get a roll call in the very beginning. Reminding everyone to mute their phone when they're not speaking is very important. I touched on that earlier, especially if you're driving home from work on a TCON call, which is normally actually a very common time that we're doing the TCONs. Just make sure that your background car noise is not creating any distraction and that you're actually truly are muted on your car phone. And then again, record meeting minutes and post them on Huddle. So for every call, in every meeting, you should be posting minutes in Huddle, so anyone who's not able to attend can go through the meeting minutes and see if there's anything that they need to do or next step actions that they need to do prior to the next meeting. And the next step actions should be involved or included in your meeting minutes so people know what's next. Next slide. Hosting a Zoom meeting. So new norm, yes, this could become the new norm. I know for the program management team, we've been working with the Zoom meetings, and it always starts off a little bit rocky, but we've actually gotten a good grip of it. And so I think that you all will do great if this is the way that your meetings are going to take a turn. So meetings can be hosted completely online, or they could be partially done online. Last year, when we were still planning to do one of our IRTs before it was canceled due to COVID-19, we had planned for some people to go on site, only the necessary people that needed to go for site recon, and then everyone else is going to dial in. So you can get creative with your meetings, and you can use online versus in person or both. But you might see some changes in how our meetings go in the upcoming year. We just need to remain flexible. Set an agenda just as if the meeting were in person, and it's really important that you stick to that agenda. One of the things that we do in the program manager meetings is for breaks, we will put on a timer. So if we're in lunch or if we're on a break for 10 minutes, the timer goes on the screen for 10 minutes so everyone can look at it and see when it is they're supposed to be back in their seat, stay on track, get ready to go. And set expectations prior to the meeting. This is really important. You don't want half of your audience showing up in uniform and the other half showing up in civilian attire. So if you have a Zoom meeting scheduled, make sure everyone knows what they're supposed to be wearing, that their camera's supposed to be on, versus if you do not want cameras on, let that be known as well. So everyone shows up to the meeting prepared and professional. And then stick to timelines, like I just mentioned. It's really important that you stick to your timelines because you want to be respectful of everyone's time and don't want to go over, especially when it comes to people that are attending meetings in their own home. It is really important. I know my experience as well. It's very important that I am off the call, when I'm supposed to be, because now it is, you are still home. And then record meeting minutes and post on Huddle. Very important. Like I said before, no matter what the meeting is, that you post all of your meeting minutes and your do outs on Huddle. Okay, and so the last tip I can give you for putting on a Zoom meeting would be to make it fun, but also keep it professional. There are ways that you can make it interesting, like with the backgrounds behind you, and definitely ways to lighten the mood so you don't feel like you're sitting there all day, but also just make sure that you keep it professional and that it is effective. Next slide. Okay, and I'm just going to wrap up quick what we went over, and then we'll go on further with details on the IPM, MPM, and FPM. So make sure that you set your meeting agenda according to what meeting you're hosting. Make sure that you know what is necessary to achieve at each, the IPM, MPM, and the FPM. All meetings should have an agenda, and you should be sticking to an expected timeline. That agenda should also be sent to your program manager, your respective service program manager, at least a month before the meeting. So if there's anything that you might have missed, or if there's anything that the program manager advice can give you, they have ample time to do that. Also, summarize all your meetings with next steps and action items in Huddle, along with your minutes, and you guys will have a great time. That's all I have, and we're going to go into now the joint management workspace, the joint planners workspace.